He met with the Chinese president. He is trying to make some progress, no? You don't see those things as a bit of progress?
What progress? Can you name one tariff line that he's reduced abroad?
No, not at this stage, no.
Not one?
No.
He said 7 months.
When your question that you think is going this way ends up doing this and comes back and slaps you right across the face, that's what just happened to Rosemary Barton. We are going to be talking about the budget, but before we get into that, we're going to give you the interview that Mr. Polyev had with Ms. Barton earlier today. And it's something to see, let me tell you. So without further ado, let's look inside ourselves.
Pierre Poilievre is, of course, the leader of the official opposition. He joins me in studio. Nice to see you, Mr. Poilievre.
It's good to be with you.
Really appreciate you being here.
Thanks for having me.
I'm going to start with some news that happened on Friday. The Supreme Court struck down another mandatory minimum, this one in relation to possession and access of child pornography. The Supreme Court has struck down a lot of mandatory minimum laws since 2015. But I wonder, in this case, what response you think the government should have in this instance?
Well, first of all, the accused and convicted offenders are appalling, frankly. These are two men who had possession of literally hundreds of images and videos of children. One of them had 377 images of children between 3 and 6 years old. Another had hundreds of videos of children between 5 and 10. They created demand for graphic material that was made by torturing, humiliating, and defiling innocent children who will never recover from it for the rest of their lives. And frankly, they were originally given 1-year sentences. That was appealed. It should have been way more than 1 year sentence. There should be a mandatory minimum of more, probably 5 or even 10 years. So this ruling is wrong-headed, and I would oppose the ruling, and I would use the notwithstanding clause to overturn it. And my future government will introduce mandatory prison sentences for possession of child pornography so that dirtbags like this go away for a very long time.
Some of the reasoning from the justices was that they could see a scenario where two 18-year-olds exchange images and then have a mandatory minimum imposed on them. I don't know what you make of that reasoning.
I think the Supreme Court needs to get away from these imaginary scenarios. The scenario before them was two men in possession over a long period of time of hundreds of images and videos that were made by torturing innocent children. And with those facts in front of them, their conclusion actually should have been that the sentence should have been much more than the 1 year and 9 months that the two dirtbag offenders received. They should go away for a very long time. Frankly, if I had my way as a father, I would lock them up and throw away the key.
The unsurprising but still disgusting thing about this whole thing is that Mark Carney has said nothing. Gary Anandasangari, public safety minister, has said nothing. And Sean Fraser, Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Canada, he has said
nothing.
It is absolutely disgraceful.
It is. I mean, as a society, if we're not protecting our most vulnerable, which in this case is children, like, what are we doing? You can't use excuses like, oh, well, two 18-year-olds might be sending, racy pictures to each other. Number one, 18 years old is an adult. That's legal. There are, let's call it corn actresses that are, 18 years old. Like, it's legal. You don't have to agree with it, but according to the laws are not being broken. So the scenario that Rosie threw out was completely wrong. And if we're not protecting kids, what are we doing? Like this, I can't, like, I know I'm stammering and stuttering, but it makes me so upset because I think of, my son who I think, is extra vulnerable because he's not able to tell us if somebody hurts him. You know, like if he gets beat up at school, he's not able to come home and say, oh, you know, so-and-so punched me. So he wouldn't be able to say if somebody was doing something inappropriate with him. These are the kids we need to protect.
Well, in any real father, let me just put that out there. Any real father, any good father, somebody messes with your child, you are going to do anything and everything you can to defend them and get justice for them. That's what you're going to do. And if you're not willing to do that, I don't know what to say to you. I really don't. Now, Mark Carney may try and say, well, you know, I don't want to be commenting on what the Supreme Court says because that's literally your job.
Of the government, and that's
literally your job.
That's why we have, it's called Section 33 in the Charter, the notwithstanding clause. That's exactly what it's for. It's so that these judges cannot dictate what exactly happens to the legislation in certain cases, and this would be one of those cases.
Well, and here's the issue. This is the problem that the Liberals now find themselves in, and it's a self-imposed bear trap. Why? Because what have they criticized Pierre Poilievre that entire election about doing? Because he said he would use the notwithstanding clause to deal with some of these problems in the justice system.
But this is what that clause is for.
Right.
To protect our most vulnerable.
And the fact that they have said absolutely nothing about this says everything you need to know about the Liberal Party of Canada, folks.
Well, it means that their strategists are like, oh my gosh, what do we do? We've backed ourselves into a corner.
I know, we say nothing.
Yeah, that's exactly what that is.
And we pull an SNC-Lavalin and we just hope it goes away. But I really hope that the Conservatives raise this in question period. They don't need to spend a ton of time on this, but I want them to raise it in question period to throw it at them. What do you think about this, folks? What do you think about this, Sean Fraser?
I think every parent in this country needs to be writing either their Liberal MP or Sean Fraser. And don't be rude, but just let them know, you know what? I'm a parent and I don't want this happening to my child or my grandchild, and you guys need to do something about this. This is what the notwithstanding clause is for.
And why haven't you spoken out against this ruling? So I think he handled that really well, and he related it back. He said, listen, I'm a father, and this is what I think. So anyway.
Well, and you know, I think Pierre, he gets emotional about these cases. We saw it at that press conference that you were at when they were talking about the 3-year-old in Welland who was just severely abused by a repeat offender. And you could see him visibly getting angry because Cruz is about that age, right? And as a parent, it's hard not to put yourself there, not to imagine your child in that situation when you hear these horrific stories.
Since the dawn of time, the role of society has been to protect children. Women and children, but children
especially
because they are the future. So if a society won't protect its children, that says a lot about the people running that society. And that's where I relate it back. It says a lot that the Liberal government, you know, they preach all of this virtue crap, and then they say nothing when a disgusting ruling like this is handed down from the Supreme Court. Very, 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 very dangerous precedent.
Well, and it's going to be upon us to speak out against it, right? Contact your MP. If they're conservative, if they're Liberal, Bloc, whatever, contact them. Let them know how you feel about this.
100%.
And again, send another letter to Sean Fraser. Hey, listen, this is what the notwithstanding clause is for. Why are you guys not protecting our children?
Well, don't worry. I'm sure they'll get to it in 10 years.
I want to move on to the budget, because that is, of course, sort of the concern and the focus of the week ahead. That you have criticized the Prime Minister for saying that sacrifices are going to be needed by Canadians. You have also said the deficit must stay at $42 billion. How do you keep the deficit at $42 billion and not make sacrifices and not ask Canadians to make sacrifices?
Well, I think it's a false juxtaposition because the deficit is causing the sacrifices. The more the government spends, the more things cost. The cost of government is driving up the cost of living. These deficits are raising the prices that people pay in real time. It's called inflation, and we know that the source of inflation is when government prints money to spend what it does not have. This bids up the price of goods, and it's why. It's no coincidence that during the time the Liberals doubled the national debt, they also doubled housing costs and doubled lineups at food banks. So
except some of the things that will be in the budget will be for housing to help Canadians. That is what they are proposing to do to help Canadians in this moment.
But with every dollar they spend comes from Canadians. And so they remember Justin Trudeau in the previous Liberal government launched a bunch of expensive housing programs saying it would help. It doubled housing costs. They announced food programs. Well, they doubled food bank lineups. So the more government spends, the more it drives up the cost of living. We can't have a costly budget that makes life more costly for the Canadian people. We want them to keep their promise. It was only a year ago that Liberals said they would keep the deficit down to $41 billion. Now, Mark Carney was elected saying he would spend less. And since that time, his deficit spending is 100% more.
But you know that his reasoning, what he will tell Canadians on Tuesday, is that he's investing. It's meant to spur investment in the Canadian economy. Things like defense, housing, as I said, industries dealing with tariffs. What of those things do you not agree with? Because he believes that investment will actually attract private capital and will force the economy to sort of rebuild in the face of Donald Trump.
You know, it seems like a familiar line, because it's exactly what the Liberals promised in 2015, 10 years ago, when they ran on producing small temporary deficits that would invest. And what happened? They doubled the national debt. And what happened to investment? It dropped more than any time in Canadian history and more than any other G7 country. Deficits are not investments. They reduce investments because they borrow money out of the economy that would otherwise have been invested in productive private enterprises, factories, mines, pipelines, LNG plants. So when government borrows, it actually subtracts from the economy by sucking up capital that would have been used for productive purposes. So if we want investment, there's only one thing the government needs to do: get out of the way. There are trillions of dollars of private investment ready to dig mines, build pipelines, set up LNG plants, build ports. We know that money exists because they're doing it in other countries around the world where there is fast approvals, less red tape, low taxes. They get private sector investment, and that's what we want to launch.
But by that explanation, by that rationale, why would you accept a $42 billion deficit? You know, Sean Spears, who was the economic advisor to your former boss, recently said on The Hub, that is a massive shift for a conservative to actually even fathom a $42 billion deficit. Why say that's okay?
It's not okay.
But you're willing to accept it, you're saying.
It's not okay.
Yeah.
It is, but it is the disastrous state we're in after 10 years of Liberal government. We have a situation where it is impossible this fiscal year, because Mr. Carney, maybe if he had introduced the budget at the beginning of the fiscal year like most normal, competent prime ministers would have done, and which all prime ministers used to do, we could have affected the deficit. But, Rosie, the half to two-thirds of the fiscal year is behind us. The money's already spent. So I would be lying to people if I said that I owned a time machine that would allow me to go back and unspend money that Mark Carney has been spending for the last seven months.
So you
shot down.
Look on her face like, okay. Like she thought she had this big gotcha moment.
Right.
Because on one hand, you know, she does what mainstream media does. I have an expert over here, and they're saying this. So this conservative expert was saying, oh, what conservative would be caught dead, you know, saying this? That's a radical shift for a conservative. And Pierre's just like, Rosie, keep up. The fiscal year is 3/4 of the way done. And
They've already spent the money.
And if Mark Carney had actually introduced the budget when he was supposed to, maybe there wouldn't have been a deficit of $42 billion. But here we are. And she's like, fair enough, Lyle. Let's move on because you got me on that question. I don't want to talk about this anymore. Like, this
is insane.
You see how Rosie, like, she thought she had him. She really did. And she thought she was going to, like, box him in. And, you know, it's easy when you have facts and truth on your side, because then you don't have to have a really good memory, aka Judge Judy. So you have Rosie trying to corner him in, and Pierre's just like fact.
And
Sorry.
well, you know, this is the most effective way to argue with liberals.
And this is where I love that Pierre is going on CBC, because he's not speaking to Rosie. This isn't for Rosie. This isn't for CBC. This isn't for conservative voters. That's not who he's talking to here. He's talking to the 60% of Canadians that are swing voters. That's who he's talking to. And this is where I'm glad that he's on CBC, and I think he needs to get on there more. I think Scheer needs to get on there more. I saw he did another one with, I think, Cochrane the other day. Send him on there. Send Lanceman on there. Send them
Larry
all.
out there. You know, this would be a perfect topic for him.
Well, Larry
because
would
it
scare them
involves
off the set, so.
Because he's good at what he does. That's why.
He'd scare them off the set. But
seriously, though, I think Larry Brock would be phenomenal regarding this particular topic, because justice it's his bulker. He's the shadow minister for justice and shadow attorney general. And
justice change, getting Pierre and the conservatives that are really good at debating and good at communicating on to legacy media, it allows them to rebut and swat down these talking points and allow the swing voters to hear the other side, because for the longest time they didn't hear anything. All they heard was liberals. And I think in hindsight's 2020, they probably would have said, probably do that over. But I think we're seeing that shift here, and I think it's a really, really good decision.
And I think that's a good point, is that previously swing voters were not hearing from the conservatives, not so much anyways, on mainstream media. They were hearing what liberals had to say about conservatives on mainstream media. So getting the conservatives on there, showing that, you know what, they're not evil maniacs the way that the mainstream media is presenting them to be. They're regular people who really do want good change in the country. I think that'll turn some voters.
I would like a zero deficit, but the Liberals have put us in this mess, and I work with what I got.
So you are not going to support the budget. There's no way you could do that. You can't lose an election, say Mark Carney's the worst, and then support the budget. That's not possible. Right?
Oh, well, I haven't seen the budget. I haven't seen the budget. I don't have telepathic powers to tell you what's in it. If it were to bring down the cost of living, an affordable budget for an affordable living is something that I support.
None of these things are, you know what the deficit's going to be. On that premise alone, I don't imagine you can support the budget.
But in addition to the deficit, I came up with some very collaborative ideas. And I asked, why isn't the government at least considering them? I've said, let's bring down the cost of food by getting rid of the industrial carbon tax on farmers and the people who feed us. Let's get rid of the food packaging tax that adds $1 billion to food prices. The fuel standard tax that's going to jack up gas prices 17 cents. Get rid of all that, and that would make food more affordable for the 2.2 million people lined up at food banks. And if the government were in a collaborative mode, recognizing they only have a minority, they would accept my ideas for an affordable budget for an affordable Canada.
Are you prepared to have an election if that's where we end up?
I'm prepared for an affordable budget. That's what I want the government to introduce. And I'm not going to speak about the plans thereafter, because I haven't seen it. But we're not going to. We don't believe that the choice has to be as the Liberals presented, which is between a costly budget and a costly election. You can have an affordable budget, and I've given Mr. Carney a plan for that. All he has to do is accept it.
President Trump said again that talks are not going to be restarted with Canada. Should Canada offer further concessions, or is at this stage no deal better than a bad deal?
Okay, before we get to that, so I think that the questions around the budget and election and that sort of thing, I think he handled it very, very well, because you're not just going to say, sure, we're going to support a budget we've never seen, or no, we're not going to support a budget that we haven't seen. That would be actually very irresponsible to say that. And if Carney was serious, he would have said, here's the budget. This is what we're going into. You going to support it? Well, apparently it's not even finalized. So how can they say that they're going to support it or not? And it was funny how Rosary made a statement at the beginning And because she didn't ask a question, Pierre's just sitting there looking at her. And then she says, "Are you?" And then there is a question. So he's like, "Yeah, I'm going to make you work on your own show, Rosemary." So that was a nice little power play there for Pierre. Very, very subtle, but the power play was very evident. Made her actually ask the question that they both knew that she asked. So that was interesting. And the fact that he then returned to what the Liberals have been trying to force on everybody. Mark Carney and his Liberals have been giving everyone an ultimatum. They basically said, you either support this budget or we're going to an election. And you want to go to an election. And Pierre's saying, well, no, that's not the only option here. The other option is you actually do your job as a minority government and negotiate with the other parties. That's what you're supposed to do in a minority government.
Yeah, because right now the Liberals are saying, again, we don't know exactly what the deficit is because it hasn't come out yet, but was it the Fraser Institute was saying that it could be up to $100 billion?
So CD Howe was estimating like 92.
Like,
Parliamentary
it's a lot
budget
of money.
officer was saying 80, but that was without the 20 additional $1 billion that the Liberals have actually put into their campaign, so they hadn't seen that yet.
So it's a lot of money, right? So basically, we'll just, for a placeholder, we'll use the number 100 billion. So either you vote for this $100 billion deficit, or we go to an election that will cost probably between $600 and $700 million. And like they're presenting that as the only two options. It's like a false dichotomy, right? The actual proper option would be for the Liberals to put forward a responsible budget working with the opposition parties so that they put something together that is good for Canada and Canadians. That's the real true option, but they're not doing that.
But look at the two sides, and this is what we said to watch for going into this, right? Because there was questions, that there's going to be an election, they're going to vote down this government, and what we said is the person who in this chicken race, the person who flinches first loses. So the person who forces the election, they will lose because the other side has complete narrative power. So what have we seen happen? We've seen McKinnon and everybody else stand up, and even Mark Carney over in Asia, when asked about this, they've said, hey, if we don't want an election, but the Conservatives, they want to force an election, so we're prepared to do what's necessary and fight for Canada. So the Liberals are trying to say, listen, if this is voted down, then we know Canada's going to be on our side because we won the last election and the opposition parties are interrupting the mandate that we've been given, and the Conservatives and all the mean bad opposition parties are voting down building Canada. So that would give them the complete narrative and they would just sail off into a majority. That's what would happen. On the flip side, if the Liberals call an election because they want one, that allows the opposition parties to say, whoa,
we just had one. We just spent, I don't even know what the total was. It was probably in the neighborhood of $500 to $600 million. I don't know the actual figure, to be fair. But we just spent like all this taxpayer money on an election. Why are you having another one 6 months later?
Right. And in a minority government, they're not doing their job. They're supposed to be working with the other parties. That's what Canadians elected. Right. That's the result of the election. They wanted Parliament to work together.
And an electorate does not like going to the polls twice in the same year for the same level of government.
Right.
The other thing I was going to say was that I think the Liberals are trying to force an election right now because they're putting forward this ridiculous budget. Like, they're not being reasonable. We don't know yet what's in this budget. We'll find out Tuesday. But their options seem to be like, support this massive deficit that we're creating, or we go to election. And Canadians don't like those options, but they're hoping that the opposition parties will also not like those options and force an election. Because again, as Ryan was saying, if the opposition forces an election, it is entirely possible that the Liberals could pick up a majority government.
Yeah, that's likely how it would go.
That's one thing. And I think the reason that they're doing that is because they see the gap in the polls narrowing, And they see that they're only, 3 seats short of a majority. So they're hoping that by forcing the opposition to call an election, that they'll be able to pick up those 3 extra seats and that they will gain a majority. And the reason they're trying to do it now, again, is because they see those polls narrowing. So they want to try to have an election now instead of in the spring, because if it goes to spring, Carney's favorability keeps falling.
Well, and as we said, what would probably happen is starting to happen, where the opposition parties are attacking the budget. The budget, irresponsible spending. What are you doing? Inflation, not working with us. You're missing this, you're missing that. And so when this passes, which it most likely will, either there's going to be some people sick that day, or there's going to be some people abstaining, or who knows what. But the Bloc don't want an election right now, the NDP don't want an election right now, and the Conservatives don't want an election right now. So they will all oppose the budget, but it will still pass, because they between the 3 opposition parties, I am very comfortable in predicting that they are going to arrange it so that they all oppose in some way, shape, or form, but there won't be enough votes to vote down the budget. And that way, they all get to take this narrative going forward that none of them supported the Liberals, and they will all just attack the Liberals for the next 6 months on this ridiculous budget. Nothing's going to get done because they won't be able to spend this money fast enough. And meanwhile, nothing's going to get better. And there's not going to be a trade deal until Kuzma at this point. I'm very comfortable in saying that. And could be wrong, but that's what I'm thinking. And things are just going to get worse for Canadians. And the opposition parties are going to be pointing it out every single day over the Christmas break, all the way in to the end of January. And the Liberals aren't going to be able to really fight back with anything.
Right. And I kind of want to touch on what you were saying earlier. So why are the Liberals trying to force an election rather than just call one themselves? Or the governing party, they can dissolve Parliament and go to an election whenever they want. As Ryan was saying earlier, whoever calls the election is going to lose it. So that's why they're trying to force the opposition parties to call this election. Now, something that we were hearing from other folks that we talked to within the party was that not only is Alberta separatism like a big thing right now, Quebec separatism is also picking up right now. So the Liberals may actually lose seats in Quebec if they pull this stunt off.
Yeah, right now. Yeah, because voters that they did have during the last election are probably going to flip back. So they may actually lose about 10 seats in Quebec. And the saying goes, the Liberals have to win Quebec to win an election, and the Conservatives have to win the GTA to win an election. So if the Liberals don't win Quebec, then they most likely lose the election. So this is what's going on here. So it's a battle for the narrative right now.
Yeah.
And whoever can control the narrative into whatever outcome, they're the ones that are going to win. That's why the opposition, if they can continue to control the narrative that this is a bad budget and it's not going to do what he says it's going to do, and all it's going to do is hurt Canadians, and the budget passes, they now control that narrative. Carney can try and say that he's going to do this, but he's had 6 months. He's had 7 months of this narrative, and nothing's changed.
Right. And I know these are kind of conflicting ideas, that if the Liberals call a majority right now, they'll lose up to 10 seats in Quebec. Also, that the Liberals may grab a majority. The point of this is that we don't really know which one of these theories is true, but either way you slice it, it's risky. It's risky for the Liberals if they might lose seats in Quebec. It's risky for the opposition parties if we go to election, if the Liberals grab a majority. So these are both very plausible outcomes, and in the event of an election, we don't know which way it would go.
The main problem right now is where the polls are, and the polls are 50-50. So if the polls were showing across the board a 10 or 12 point lead for the Liberals, they would 100% go snap election. We're not getting support for this budget. Canadians, you put our faith in us. Let's go. And then they would win in a majority. Vice versa. If the opposition parties were going to be in a good position to actually gain more seats and pull down the government, and the polls were reflecting that way, they would probably vote it down, no problem. But because it's 50-50, they don't know. And because they don't know, it's whoever can control that narrative and whoever forces that election is going to lose control of that narrative, because you get painted as the bad guy right quick, because it's a $600 or $700 million price tag, and Canadians go back to the polls, and we're pulled out. So.
And, you know, I think this is kind of what we were talking about earlier, you and I, is I think this is why the mainstream media ran with that clip of ours where Pierre was talking about what he would do if someone in his party was found doing something corrupt. Why they took that clip and went with it for like almost a week and a half is because I think the Liberals are pushing for an election, and they don't want to be the ones to call it, but they want to be the ones to paint Pierre and the Conservatives in this awful light.
Well, and the Liberal talking heads are still trying to sneak it back in.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, you'll hear it now and then.
Well, why again are we choosing between two terrible options when we were promised, Mr. Carney promised a good deal by July 21st. He promised he could negotiate a win with President Trump. Those were his promises. Now, some might say, look, it's unrealistic to expect to get that from President Trump. So why did he promise it?
Well,
it was not his only, it wasn't just that it was a promise.
Yeah.
It was the promise.
Except you promised, when you were running to be prime minister, that tariffs would be paused across the board and that you would get a deal with Donald Trump with tariffs paused. I mean, that also doesn't seem very plausible given the way the president has behaved.
Well, I have to be prime minister for you to find out.
Well,
right? But what we do know is that Mr. Carney is prime minister, has been for 7 months, and these are the results that he's got. Since he promised to get rid of American tariffs, they've doubled and tripled in the case of softwood lumber. He says he's going to open up other markets, so he meets with the Chinese. And what do? They increase tariffs on canola, seafood, and pork. He meets with the Indians. What do? Increase tariffs on our peas by 30%. He meets with the Brits. What do? They hit us with blockades of our beef. It seems like everywhere Mark Carney goes, with these grand meetings and photo ops, we end up with more tariffs. His failures abroad are costing us at home.
He met with the Chinese president, though, and they made a decision that their officials were going to get together and try and solve the trade irritants. He is trying to make some progress, no? You don't see those things as a bit of progress?
What progress? Can you name one tariff line that he's reduced abroad?
No, not at this stage, no.
Not one.
No.
He said 7 months.
So what would...
Brilliant. You know, it was smooth and it wasn't aggressive. It was just like, can you name one? No, not currently.
When your question that you think is going this way ends up doing this and comes back and slaps you right across the face, that's what just happened to Rosemary Barton. Like, well, you know, he's doing all these things. Yeah, everywhere he goes. Every time he meets with somebody, we get more tariffs. Well, he's meeting with the Chinese. And Pierre's like, really?
They already have tariffs on us, don't they? The canola tariffs?
And he's like, name one tariff that he's been able to affect. Oh, I guess you're right. And you know, I love that swing voters heard that. I really, really do.
You need to chop that up into a short, and we need to make that go viral.
100%. 100%. So... NP Nation, get ready for that one.
Throw it back in CBC's face. They want to take ours out of context and make it go viral. We'll take the full context of theirs and make that go viral.
100%. And Rosemary Barton admitting Mark Carney has done nothing. That's what that was. So, congratulations, CBC. Your attempt to defend Mark Carney actually hurt him a lot.
He's been on 20 trips.
What would you like to see him do then? What do you think is the missing piece here?
Keep his promise.
Yeah, but how? It's easy to say that. It's the how that's difficult.
Well, the how, I said that I would face President Trump and the rest of the world from a position of strength. Right now, we're in a position of weakness. The Americans know we can't sell our goods to anyone else because we don't have pipelines and LNG plants to get our most valuable export to other markets. I would pass the Canadian Sovereignty Act, which would rapidly greenlight and legalize pipelines, LNG plants, and other infrastructure.
But the government is doing some of that. There's an LNG plant that's happening. There are major projects.
Approved by Stephen Harper.
Well, there's an expansion of it. There's an expansion of it. And the Major Projects Office, it does allow them to get around laws and regulations. You know, that's the goal of it.
That's the goal. We're 7 months in, and the clock is ticking. I think we've been been through enough goal setting, and now it's time for results achieved, and we're not getting any results. Mr. Carney won't even tell us if he supports an oil pipeline to the Pacific. His energy minister says it's just too hypothetical. What do you mean hypothetical? We had a project that was approved prior to the Liberals taking office. So here we are with no progress on expanding our resources or getting things done. It's all very good that he's setting up these offices and agencies in Ottawa, but I've got news for him. We're not going to make our economy economically independent by setting up new bureaucracies in Ottawa.
I want to ask you about leadership, because I know that it's probably on your mind. You have a leadership review coming up in January. How confident are you that you will be okay?
Love it. She tried to interrupt, but Pierre just steamrolled because he's like, hey, you're asking me a question. I'm answering the question. And I'm indicting all of these problems with Mark Carney's policies. And I'm reminding Canadians, it's been 7 months since the election. Nothing's changed. And all he's been doing is increasing the size of the public service. Congratulations. Hello? What do you think is going to happen here? And she says, well, they're approving like LNG plants and stuff like that. And yeah, that was under Stephen Harper. Well, they're expanding it. Come on. Like, Pierre is just laughing at the fact that Rosemary is grasping at straws, and the only progress that's being made is from the previous Conservative government 10 years ago.
Well, you know, the thing about Pierre, because we've interviewed him a couple times now, is he's not rude. If you're straightforward and stick to the facts and ask questions in a straightforward way, when you're trying to trap him and you're trying to put out garbage, like, oh, well, they're, you know, what was it, building liquefaction plants?
Liquefaction, that's the LNG.
Yeah. So, and it's like, well, yeah, the Liberals might be expanding them, but Harper built them.
Right? You wouldn't have anything to work with if it wasn't for the previous Conservative government. And
again, why don't we have a pipeline? Why isn't one in the works? Why are we still selling our materials to the United States at a loss?
One of the best parts was when Mark Carney said in one of the recent press conferences that China and Canada share the same climate change goals.
What?
Yeah. That was a massive gaslight right there. Yeah, you know, China builds a new coal plant every couple of weeks. Yeah, you know, they share the same goals. They're the number one polluter on the planet, but yeah, you know, they share the same goals.
We'll survive that vote.
Very.
Yeah. Why? What makes you confident?
Well, because I'm going to focus on doing my job. And people say, well, you're going to get distracted with this. And the answer is no, because the same thing I have to do in January is what I have to do on Election Day, which is to do a good job.
Yeah.
And that means doing what I was sent here to do by the record 8.3 million people who voted for us, which is to fight for an affordable life, fight for our young people to be able to afford homes, fight for parents to be able to have safe streets for their kids to grow up on. And that's the job I'm doing, and that's why I believe I'll win the support of both the party and the country.
And you think that the party will be willing to give you a second chance? Because the last time they did that was Stephen Harper.
And look how that turned out.
Yeah,
we were
that's
in power
right.
for 10 years. So
but do you think
I'm
that
glad you pointed that one out.
Do you think that they'll be willing to give you a second chance, Mr. Poilievre?
I think so. I'm fighting for the things that our party and our country need. Mm-hmm. And the great thing about our party is we're united around the things that we believe in and are fighting for. We want balanced budgets and low taxes so people can afford good lives. We want to lock up criminals so that our people are safe. We want to get immigration and borders back under control. We want a common Canadian identity that unites us all. We want to bring back the promise of this country, that anyone who works hard gets a great life. And so the great thing I have, the benefit I have, is a party whose values and interests are aligned with the country's. And that's why I think both January and the next election will go in the right direction.
I don't know. I don't know what the thought process about that was, because it didn't feel like this was supposed to be a neutral interview based on how she was asking these questions. So...
yeah, not really. There were a few gotchas in there, and Pierre navigated them very well.
And got her.
Yeah.
As a result of them.
Yeah.
So it's fascinating how that worked out. But anyway, we'll see how Pierre navigates this coming week, because if he does it even half as well as he navigated that interview, should be an interesting week.